Mira was about to answer when Sisveta noticed how different she looked from when he dropped her off.
Wait,
He said to her, and then turned his attention to Klarood.
do we know her nutrition and sleep needs?
Yes. She is an omnivore who needs 2 to 5 meals a day, which is determined by how much is eaten at the meal and 8 hours of sleep in a day cycle.
How long is her day cycle?
We determined that our hour cycle and her hour cycle are similar enough to...
Klarood, that isn't what I asked. How long is her day cycle?
24 hours, Captain. Why?
Because she looks like a skeetling that is refusing to attend to its sleep cycle.
He focused back on Mira.
How long has it been since you last attended to your sleep cycle?
Her eyes were still mostly white when he had first seen her, but now they were mostly red. Her eyelids were drooping, and her body seemed to have a heaviness to it with her movements that weren't there before. Mira's thoughts were becoming increasingly sluggish, and even this simple math took her far too long to figure out, so she had to do it out loud.
We each had an air tank with 1 spare, so 6 tanks. They each held 3 hours of air. Fixing the life support systems left me with about an hour left, so that was 14 hours. Then I had to refill them. That was a lot quicker. 2 hours, I think? And then I was fixing the thruster when you picked me up. I think that was a little less than an hour.
Sisveta was shocked.
I left you here 3 hours ago. You have been awake for at least 17 hours before you arrived here. Have you eaten anything?
Mira shook her head.
And Klarood, I see you ran an endurance test, a speed test, and a full skeletal strain test. Have you even allowed her to rest?
Klarood was very embarrassed as he replied that he hadn't. The human had been nearly non-stop active for 17 hours and then endured another 3 hours of testing. While that was not a full day for her 24-hour day, it was nearly a full galactic day, which was 20 hours. Most species were awake for 10 hours and asleep for 10 hours. And then he had another realization. This exhausted human had scored so high in the endurance testing, but was still not the highest. While exhausted, he shuddered at what a well-rested human might be able to do. While Klarood was lost in his thoughts, Sisveta was speaking to Mira.
You have my apologies, Mira. We should have ensured you had rest and nourishment. Do you think you can eat or drink anything?
Mira replied in the negative.
Do you think you can walk a little way so I can get you settled in your room?
Sisveta helped her up and shot Klarood a glare.
We will speak of this later.
Klarood knew he had messed up. He had assumed the new alien would say something. Mira was walking much slower now, but Sisveta understood. Just like he was talking to a tired skeetling that had to be guided to their nest, he kept up a litany of, just a little longer, and we're almost there. Once he got her into the room, he had her press her belt against the wall so that the room would now be set to her own atmospheric needs, which he briefly explained, so he could take the belt off of her and set it next to the door. He guided her to the nest, which was circular in shape, with a raised padded edge all the way around. The interior would be soft and plush.
Is there anything you need removing for comfort?
She struggled to remove her foot coverings, so he helped her to do so. Once they were off, she instinctively climbed into the nest and was soon breathing deeply. He left the room and strode back to the medical bay to have that talk with the chief medical officer. Mira woke up with a start. Where was she? What was she laying on? What woke her up? Was it a noise? As she began to move, the lights slowly increased. She was still breathing quickly with alarm as she took in her surroundings.
Hello? Mira, are you awake yet?
Mira realized that was what had awakened her. She had heard the door open. It was Klarood that was calling out to her.
Sorta?
She called back. She climbed out of the strange-looking but oddly comfortable bed. She knew her hair was probably everywhere, but she was still groggy enough to not care. The bed was separated from a small living area, so as she moved past the partition between the spaces, she saw Klarood standing near the open doorway with a cart of food.
May I come in?
But you're already in?
Mira replied, confused. Klarood took a small step forward and put his hand up. It connected to a field of some kind that prevented him from moving further.
You must have different customs. These rooms are all made so you cannot hear any commotion going on in the halls. So if you want to visit with someone, you open the door and can enter a small area just inside the doorway. Then you ask permission to enter further. It must be given each time. Sisveta set you as the owner of this room, so you are the one who can allow another to enter. If you allow me to enter, you must say, "Yes, you can enter."
He explained.
Yes, you can enter.
He grabbed the cart he had brought with him and directed it into the room. The cart was similar to any food trolley you might see back on Earth, except the cart did not have wheels. It hovered at a height that was comfortable to Klarood to push but wouldn't be for Mira to push. He brought the cart over to a small table that was set low to the ground. As Mira studied it, it was set up similarly to the traditional Japanese tables. Instead of cushions spread around the table, there was a place you could sit that had a different look, almost similar to the material of the bed, that encircled the table, and there was space beneath the table for you to put your legs. Mira soon learned that the table could be raised or lowered with a few buttons so that it was at a species' own comfort. In fact, it could even have different levels if different species were sitting at the same table. Klarood brought the cart close to the table and then lowered it so he could take dishes off of it as needed instead of filling the table with food and hydration.
I must apologize to you. I did not realize how long it had been since your last sleep cycle, and I should have asked. It is part of a new species protocol to ask about needs, and in my excitement, I forgot to ask and ensure your needs were being met. There has not been a new first contact within my life cycle, and I let my excitement get in the way of decency. I will do better. He looked down and then back to the food. In that spirit, I would like to introduce you to some food that is offered on board. I didn't know what kind of eating aids your species might use, so I brought some of each we have on board.
Some of the utensils were very strange looking, and she wondered at how they might be used. She did see something that looked similar to a spoon as well as what looked similar to chopsticks, and so chose those.
Interesting. Those are the eating aids of the trick. You haven't met them yet, but they are a nocturnal species, and the only other species we have on board.
At Mira's confused and anxious body language, he replied,
All will be well. We will meet your nutritional needs, and then I will show you the features of your room. Our computers are still analyzing your life fluid so that we can make vaccines for us all. We want to ensure we do not catch anything you may be carrying, and we do not want you to catch anything we may be carrying. It was a bad first contacts before that became protocol. To those ends, I must ask you to stay in your room until tomorrow. We will vaccinate the crew first, and then I will come and vaccinate you. After a few hours, I will be able to give you a tour of the ship.
He could tell she had many questions.
Eat first. Worry about the rest after. Yes?
Once she had agreed, he began showing her various foods, told her if they were meant for herbivores or carnivores. She was the only omnivore on the ship, and let her try them. He had already been able to run scans on anything that would cause her harm, so he knew that she would be able to digest any of these foods without issues. After they ate their fill, he showed her the bathroom and how everything worked, and then to the panel for the computer system in the room. He showed her how to contact him and how to have the computer read text so that she could understand it. Her clearance would be basic, so there was no worry that she would get into a part of the computer she shouldn't.
Do you have any questions for me before I go back to medical?
Yeah, something has been nagging me. Why could I understand Captain Sisveta before he could understand me?
Klarood considered how to answer. This was not a classified subject. Even children knew how it worked, but he had to ensure he was answering in line with her understanding of science, as well as in a way to not cause unnecessary fear.
You mentioned that there are many languages on your homeworld. Yes?
Mira nodded.
Are there people that can speak many languages?
Some people even make that their profession so that they can translate for people.
Do you have languages that had a common ancestor, but have developed to be different languages?
Yes, there are several language families like that.
Mira replied.
Do you think that if a person who already knew many languages would have an easier or a more difficult time learning another?
Definitely easier. I had a friend in high school that picked up new languages very quickly.
The translator we use is similar. The programming has learned thousands upon thousands of languages. That is why it can understand a new language so quickly. The other half of it is where it is placed. It is able to connect with our brains and learns quickly how to communicate. The translator already understood what the captain said. In the beginning, the language is clunky and more formal. Sometimes the words are almost correct. So, when the captain spoke to you, you thought you were hearing words in your language. Instead, you were hearing a basic semblance of emotions and intentions that were turned into words. As we have spoken together, the languages we hear from each other become smoother. This is like a computer program that has learned what you mean when you create shortcuts and can therefore do similar things before you realize you wanted to do them. The program is not intelligence. It cannot think on its own. It can, however, learn and adapt to our needs quickly. You can also easily correct it when it adapts incorrectly. I feel like I'm over-explaining this. I don't want you to fear it. It cannot make you do anything, nor is it able to listen to your thoughts. I hear that was a bad first contact. The species understood the explanations to believe their own thoughts were not safe. We do not have such a technology. It would be unethical.
He shivered at that last thought.
Please tell me I have not made further mistakes and caused unnecessary fear or harm.
Mira chuckled.
We also have program interfaces that become more user-friendly as you use them.
Klarood visibly relaxed.
Is there anything else?
When she replied in the negative, he replied,
I must leave then. I'll let the captain know you are awake. I know he had more questions for you. One of us will be by later for the next meal. Contact me if you have any needs.